So in this first week of patch 11.2, there seems to be a pretty good method that allows you to farm any tier of Delve while also farming up a decent amount of undercoins and brand experience, which there's not a ton of other ways to actually farm these different things in Delves this week. And this is going to be using the new mechanics that came with Season 3 that is based around your Reshiwrap's cloak. And keep in mind, there are no bountiful delves, and you can't earn any experience for the Delver's Journey Renown track. Those will both go active in the first week of Season 3, which is next week. Now, the first thing you're going to need for this farm is you're going to need the second upgrade for your Reshiwrap's artifact cloak. Now, completing the main campaign will give you 3 threads, which will allow you to get upgrade 1. And to get upgrade 2, you can do a bunch of different content. The easiest way to get upgrade 2 is actually just to complete 3 delves of any difficulty, because the chest at the end will give you 1 thread each time you complete one. So just go do 3 really fast delves on tier 1 and you'll have your 3 other threads and you can upgrade your cloak. And also keep in mind, this is account bound. So once you have all 6 of your threads for this week, you can just go log on all of your other characters and they will have the 6 threads, but you do have to go to the NPC and actually put in the upgrades on each character. Also check out my last video if you want to know how to skip the main campaign on all of your alts and get your artifact cloak very quickly on those alts. So you're going to need that second upgrade to do this farm. Now this farm should be able to be done in some way in basically every single delve, but the delve I have been using right now is the Nightfall Sanctum, and it's currently on the story of Signal Noise, which does seem pretty good for this, but Nightfall Sanctum is really good because you start on that big ledge and you can see a majority of the delve from there, and that's a really big part of this farm. So let's start with the easier thing you're going to be farming in this farm, and that's Flicker Gates. So once you have the second upgrade of your Reshiwrap's, there will be 2 new mechanics, the Ethereal Routing Station and Flicker Gates. Flicker Gates can just spawn pretty much anywhere in a delve. I'm pretty sure they're set spawn locations, but they seem to try to hide them a bunch. And those are just these like void looking portals that you go click on. Some of the time it'll just give you undercoins, some brand experience, and a bunch of other like random delve items. I'm not sure if you can get actual gear out of this, but you basically just click them and it gives you loot. Some of the time it will spawn like a copy of the nemesis of the season, Kaiveza. She's much easier than the actual Kaiveza that invades your delves sometime, so she's pretty easy to defeat, this copy of her. And once you defeat her, you'll get the loot instead of just getting it from clicking the portal. And these Flicker Gates can also randomly become an Ethereal Routing Station. Now Ethereal Routing Stations are a really big part of this farm, and these will just be a big gate that you'll be able to see pretty easily in these delves. Now once you enter one of these gates, this is essentially taking you out of the original delve you were in and putting you in a new, much smaller one that's much faster to complete. And there's 5 different versions of these routing stations you can get. You can get Dodgeball, which is basically just these like waves of orbs that come through that you have to dodge, and then there's a boss at the end to defeat. It seems the bosses in all of these rooms, you only have to get to 50% life, by the way. There's Escaped Specimen, which you defeat groups of different delve enemies. It just has a % bar. You defeat them. Once you defeat them all, it's completed. There's Invader Duo, which you fight Zekfir and the Underpin boss, and again, you just have to get them to 50% life, so they're much easier. They also don't have all the mechanics of their normal versions. There's a Boss Rush, which I haven't gotten yet. Fight 3 random delve bosses, and then Ethereals, you just defeat groups of these Shadow Guard Ethereals. So all pretty simple, but it basically is all in one single room, and once you complete this objective, that's much faster than doing anything in normal delves. Your delve is now complete. A room at the end opens, and you get the normal loot you would get from completing the delve you entered. And also, once there's bountiful delves, if you get one of these gates, it'll give you the rewards like it's a bountiful delve. It still gives you the same rewards based upon what tier you're in. And what's also really nice is it gives you the max reward of the Nemesis Strongbox. So if you're say doing like a tier 11 delve and there are those 4 groups of Nemesis enemies that you defeat and it upgrades another box of loot at the end of delves, it'll just give you the max 1 when you complete the Ethereal Routing Station. So this is incredibly good, and it's basically just a skip to complete a delve significantly more quickly than you normally could with the max amount of loot you could get out of that delve. Now, the way I've been farming this specifically in Nightfall Sanctum is kind of cheesy, but you're not actually going in to complete the normal delve. You're going in just to look for flicker gates and an ethereal routing station. And after you've looted all the flicker gates and looked if there's a routing station or not, you just leave the delve, then re-enter another one. And this seems to be faster than actually just running through the delves in terms of how much loot you can get. Now, there is one thing you need to understand about the ethereal routing stations. It seems that you have to defeat one of the nemesis groups to get it to spawn. I've done a bunch of these runs, and it seems that defeating those nemesis groups is what shows you a gate if it's there. Now, in this version of Nightfall Sanctum, and you'll see in the footage, you have the path to the right that takes you all the way down to the path below you that you can just look over the edge and see. What you're mainly going to be looking for is any of the void looking flicker gate portals that may be in that starting area. If you see those, you go on them, you click them, you defeat the enemy. If it comes out, that'll give you some loot and some undercoins, which is a really big part of this farm. And then the second thing you're looking for is any of the nemesis groups at this first section of the delve. Sometimes you'll get no nemesis groups at this first section. If you're doing like a tier 11 delve where you have 4 total groups of nemesis in that run, there's almost certainly going to be one at this first starting area. So you load in, you go to the edge, you look for any flicker gates, then you look for any of the nemesis groups at the start. Once you find a nemesis group at the start, you go defeat that. And then on that bottom platform in front of you, there is a location that the ethereal routing station will spawn. Now, I do think there's multiple locations in delves where these routing stations can spawn, but it's not really worth going through a lot of the delve and finding like a routing station later in the delve. So that's why you're just leaving the delve if you don't find one of these at the start. That's legitimately all you're going to be doing. You go in, go to the ledge, look for any flicker gates, go click on those if you find them, then go defeat one of the nemesis groups. Once you defeat that, look at the location you'll see in the footage in this video, see if the ethereal routing station spawns. If it does, go in there, complete the objective, get the loot that you would normally get at the end of completing that delve, and then leave the delve, go back in, rinse and repeat. There's a few reasons why this is so good. First off, you're going to be getting a good amount of flicker gates while doing this, so that's a bunch of additional undercoins, brand experience, and random delve items. And then for the amount of time spent with how often you find these routing stations, you should be completing more delves over time than you would running through the delves. Now, in my opinion, for higher tier delves, especially if you're like on an ult that's not super geared, is actually better for this farm. Because if you're doing just like tier 1 delves to run through, or if you're just progressing your delves to higher tiers, so you're on lower tiers, it's probably going to be quicker just to do the delves until you get to higher tiers, because you can just insta-kill and run through and kill everything super quickly. But once you get to higher tiers, this may actually be much quicker, because going through one of these delves on like tier 8 to 11, the enemies become significantly more tanky, so it just takes a long time to get through the delve. But if you're just rinse and repeating, going out of the delve, going back in and looking for these routing stations right at the start, this can be quite a bit quicker. And then you're just getting a bunch of additional undercoins from the flicker gates as well, which is one of the big reasons I was actually farming like this, because these undercoins are actually going to be super good going into week 1 of season 3. Because if you didn't know, there is a new NPC vendor which unlocks when you get level 3 of the Delver's Journey, which we can start getting in week 1 of season 3, so next week. And that vendor will spawn at the end of any, I think, tier 9 plus delve, and he will sell you champion track versions of all of the delve trinkets of this season for 2,000 undercoins a piece. So not only are some of these trinkets going to be absurdly strong going into week 2 and further weeks, because every season has had some of these delve trinkets be ridiculously strong, but you can transfer undercoins to other characters. Building up a bunch of undercoins, you'll be able to just go and get 2 champion track delve trinkets on basically all of your alts if you have the undercoins very easily, and those will be some pretty strong trinkets. So this has just seemed to be a pretty strong farm for this in week 1. Most likely when we go into week 2 and go into week 1 of season 3, you'll probably just be going and doing any of the bountiful delves on like your main and any of your alts to farm up the undercoins and farm up all of the different gear. But I think specifically for week 1, this is a very good farm. But that's all I want to go over, so thanks for watching.